Right. Just give me a second. All right, that's perfect. So, welcome to the live trade log. And today I will actually go through the same setup I took on NASDAQ on 3 different days, right? So, all the setups were taken in the university, so in real time. And I'm going to explain every single trade to you so you all understand what you've missed out on and what you can definitely add to your arsenal, right? So the first thing is going to be a trade on NASDAQ, which is on a Monday, right? It's ideally not the best day to trade, but whenever the protocol presents itself, we take a trade and that is all, right? We can't really control the markets. So whenever it does give us a setup, we take it without hesitation. So Tuesday was a no trading day, right? And that's completely fine. We are actually looking for close to about 1 to 2 trades in a week, right? That is basically how I like to view price as. I don't like to view for or search for trades quite often. So with that in mind, Wednesday was a win as well. And fortunately, Thursday was a win as well, right? So the 0.5% win is the reason because I did mention in the stream that I'll be taking a 0.5% risk on this trade. All right, so that is the reason why. And overall, we did net about 3.5% for the week, which is pretty high, but that's just what it is, right? Some weeks were pretty good, some weeks were not really great. But over the past month and this month so far, I'm actually quite surprised the way August has played out with the setups, right? So without further ado, let's get into the setups itself, right? So the first is going to be Monday, right? Let me just give you a brief understanding of higher time frames as well. So before we get into the higher or into the day trades. So the first thing is the monthly fair value gap on NASDAQ is playing out extremely well, right? So this reaction is not really something which is out of the blue, right? We kind of expected that price will take out your previous month's high as it did right about there, and price expanded lower to tap into this fair value gap. All right, so that is basically what we had on the monthly time frames. And as you all know, price and time are fractal, and every time you go to a lower time frame, you will see this exact phenomenon repeat itself, right? So that is really what we have on the higher time frames. So with that in mind, do I believe that NASDAQ is going to make new all-time highs? I definitely do believe so. And that is something to keep an eye on, right? So let me actually go to your daily time frame and we can actually get into the setups, right? So the first trade was on Monday, right? So if you actually, sorry, yeah, that's just the same thing again, right? So first trade is on Monday right here. So price is tapped into this monthly fair value gap, and you can see on this daily structure right here, we have clear engineered liquidity, right? You can see right there, all of these are engineered liquidity highs. Price pushes lower and Monday opens right about here, right? So there are two things you need to consider on Monday. The first is going to be this bearish fair value gap right here, all right? So that is quite important. So we do have a bearish fair value gap right there, and price opens right about here, right? So if I go to the 5-minute time frame, which is ideally what I use to execute my trades, this is the Monday trade, right? So I already have that marked out. I should have deleted it, but that's all right. Okay. So what did I see on Monday, right? So this was a trade on Monday and it was a great win, right? So I'll just go to the replay button and just turn this off here. All right. So you have every session here. So basically throughout this entire week, I traded the same setup at the same time with the same pair, right? So NASDAQ, of course, is the pair we did trade, and the setup is during your New York time frame, right? New York session. So if you just want to trade one session, right? For the rest of your life, I would literally recommend you to look into New York session, but not the one which starts at 7:30, because if you're into indices, you need to be quite aware of the fact of this 9:30 a.m. equities open. All right, so that's very important. So try to execute after 9:30 a.m. and before 12 p.m. right? So I'd like to close before 11 a.m. So that's why I have this marked out right here as the skill zone, or else you can definitely look into New York session. All right, so this is the reason why we have a beautiful trade, right? So what does price do during Asia? You can see that it literally consolidates, right? And London kind of consolidates, but it does move a bit lower, right? It did form a new low during London session, which is fine as long as we didn't really expand quite a lot, right? So price pushes lower, we just have a retracement and the session closes, right? So Asia's highs and lows, London highs and lows are the first thing you need to mark out. So in this case, we have a beautiful Asia's high right there. And we also have London's low right here, right? So at 9:30, these are the only liquidity pools I'm looking at. And definitely I'm looking at this new week opening gap, right? So this is a new week opening gap, which has been formed right here. Okay, so I can actually mark this out in blue. So you can see that this is the new week opening gap, right? So whenever price forms this gap, usually price moves back low to fill it, right? It's not really a clear science, but it does fill it from time to time, right? So we do push lower. And what does price do at 9:30, right? This was key to the trade. At 9:30, we have a beautiful manipulation, right? So, which is right here. So that is beautiful manipulation, guys, all right? So we have a clear set of stops being taken out right here. You can see right there. So I did all the trades which I'm explaining here has been taken live in the university. So if you are considering reading this type of price action in real time, I would highly recommend to look into it. And let's get into the trade, right? So price was below the two-day open. So we do have simple rules, and price is below two-day open, which means you are supposed to be bullish. Whenever price is above two-day open, you're supposed to be bearish, right? You can see I will explain the same in the other setups as well. And I'm not really changing rules there. So price manipulates into this new week opening gap and fills it right there, okay, at a 9:30. So after that, what do we look for? We look for our confirmation, right? Which is going to be your change in state of delivery, right? Change in state of delivery is not this last down close candle. It is a series of last down close candles, right? When you're bullish, and it's a series of last up close candles when you're bearish, right? So after that, price closes through and we have a beautiful inversion fair value gap as well, right? So as you like to call it, the IFEG, we have a beautiful inversion as well. So you can literally enter at CISD or at IFEG, right? So actually watching this in real time is something else, but watching this set of price action repeat itself, and especially the 9:30 manipulation trades, right? They're just amazing. This is actually one of the most preferred setups I have for NASDAQ, which is 9:30 manipulation and price expands to the liquidity pool created earlier in the day, right? So this was a trade close to about 2 hours. Actually, I was out at Asia's high. I was actually out somewhere here, right, at London's high. So we did have a few objectives there. So price actually got there and we managed this trade beautifully. But overall, the trade was a win, right? So do make a note of this if you haven't. And if you do want to get into trading NASDAQ, I would definitely recommend you to learn the setup, right? This is extremely important because these setups are really high probability. And when they do repeat, they are pretty aggressive as well, all right? So that is Monday. Let's go to the next day, which is Wednesday, right? So overall, I'm just going to show you the percentages I made and not the money in and of itself, because I don't want you all to be dependent on the returns, right? And you can literally make unlimited money with the setup, but it's all about how you execute, right? And I trade prop firms, I trade with different firms, so it's quite difficult for me to give you a clear number, and I don't want to get into the habit of doing that, right? It can actually overwhelm you, and that's not something which I want to do, right? So far we made about 1.1%, and you can actually see this in terms of your funded accounts, right? If you have a 100K funded account, a 1.1% is about $1,100. And if you do have about 300K funded accounts, which is what I'd recommend, not recommend you to risk 3% on a trade and make 3%. I would recommend you to get a lot more funded capital. So 1% can mean a lot more, right? So moving on to Wednesday now, which is 1.8%, right? We made quite a lot there on Wednesday. Let's get into that now. So Wednesday would be right here. So I'm sure you can just look at the chart and see it's the exact same setup once again, right? There's really nothing else. So go to the replay button and just turn it on right here. Right? It's the same exact setup, but it's in the opposite direction, right? Monday was the long and Tuesday is the, and Wednesday is the short, right? So we have Asia consolidation, right? That's the first thing we like to see. And you can see its previous session, which is London, kind of consolidation, but it did move a bit lower, right? And after all of this, we have equal lows presented right here, okay? So that's a clear engineered liquidity, right? It's the best form of liquidity in my opinion. A plus liquidity, right? So do make a note of that. And what does price do during New York, right? 9:30 specifically, that's where you want to see, and that's where this box begins for me, which is when I like to look for trades, right? You can see we have a beautiful manipulation, right? Price takes out previous session's high during 9:30, right? Now, once it does that, right, this is quite important because I was looking at Twitter and everyone took a loss on a short here on Wednesday, which was quite concerning to me because we had no confirmation, guys, right? There is literally no confirmation. We tap into a bullish fair value gap at 9:35 and we react very well out of it, right? So trying to short this is something which I saw a lot of Twitter accounts post that, right? Not necessarily you. So that is something you should definitely avoid. Is there a CISD presented? Definitely not. Right? This is your CISD. There is no CISD at all, right? What does price do after that? We expand higher once again. And at 10 a.m., right? That is when we get your CISD confirmation, right? You can see this candle at 10 a.m. closes through it. That is your perfect confirmation that price is now going to head lower to these equal lows, right? And this was actually quite beautiful and it did take a lot of time for price to deliver, but we did manage to sit through it in the university. It was about 15 minutes. Usually when price takes more than 3 candles, right, it's not a concrete rule, but whenever price takes around 3 candles, it kind of tends to just move higher, right? It doesn't really tend to expand lower in the intended direction, but that is fine. We actually stuck through this in the university the entire time and price pushes lower. And the first draw we were looking for was these lows, right? Why is that? Because we have engineered liquidity all the way here, right? Equal lows. So that's the first thing. And as I mentioned before, price and time are fractal. So definitely something which price can get to, right? So the short was placed right here at the CISD. Stop was here above these candles highs because price will not get there. That is the invalidation for the trade, definitely. And price gets to Asia slow, right? Overall, this was an extremely good trade. And we got about 1.8%. I personally got about 1.8% on this trade, right? So watching this live once again will really help you. And there's nothing like it, right? There's nothing like real time when you watch price because there are a lot of decisions, a lot of psychological factors that go into this, right? And even though you might know the setup perfectly, it will take time for you to learn how to execute it in real time, right? So perfect, exact same setup. I'll just go over it once again. The bias is quite simple. We are above today open, so we are bearish, right? Just as I mentioned for Monday, we were below today open, so we were bullish, right? So very easy to frame your bias. We are above today open, we are bearish, and New York manipulation setup. And once again, and price did manipulate after 9:30. So it was not exactly at 9:30. We didn't form this high. I believe everyone was looking for that setup, but they didn't wait for confirmation and was stopped out quite early. Price pushes higher and then expands beautifully right after. All right. So that's an extremely good trade. We made about 1.8% on that trade, right? So that concludes Wednesday, right? That's perfectly done on a Wednesday. And after Wednesday, I was really ready to end my week there, but I do stream 7 days in a week. So I did open the charts once again, and on Thursday at the exact same time, right? I'll just show you what we saw at that time. So Thursday was quite great as well. And I didn't size up because of the reason that I already had wins earlier in the week, right? So you need to learn how to manage your accounts, right? Whenever you win earlier in the week, just try to end that week with the win and not try to force trades, right? And whenever you do not get a setup earlier in the week, you can be sure that during Thursday or Friday, you will get a good setup, and that is when you can actually size up, right? So let's go to Thursday here, and I'm sure you all can see exactly the same setup once again, right? And this is the beauty of NASDAQ. Whenever price starts to deliver, it is going to deliver extremely well, right? See the similarities between this setup and the one I just discussed for Monday, right? It is extremely similar, right? The exact movement, you can see it again and again. Asia consolidates, right? London consolidates as well, while moves a bit lower, right? I'm just repeating this over and over again, guys. You can see it. And price takes out these lows at and around 930, right? What does 930 do? 930 forms a low, right? The exact same thing we had on Monday. Price is below 2-day open, so we are bullish. If price is above 2-day open, we are bearish. So that is your bias, you're bullish. Perfect, done. Price pushes higher right here at 935, right? So that is Thursday. So where is your confirmation? Once again, your confirmation is going to be your CISD, right? See right there, change in state of delivery. That is the confirmation, guys. We have this bullish candle right there. Sure, we do have another bullish candle, or these down close candles, right? And you can all see that the entry was quite different today, right? So the entry for me was here, right? That is exactly where I entered, and my take profit were at these equal highs, right? You can see we have low resistance all the way through here to Asia's high, right? That was what my target was. So I did enter long right there and took off positions right here at one of these highs, right? So that is what my trade was. I can just show that to you. It was like that, right? Now you can your question might be, why didn't I enter right here? Okay, why was my entry not here? Because we didn't get one, right? We really didn't get one. You can see we have a CISD confirmation, and at 940 we opened and the price didn't push lower to tap the CISD and move higher, right? We didn't get that. That is why my entry was right here, okay? So I expected that these down close candles will act as support, right? Which is going to be your order block, and then it's going to move higher to these highs, right? So that is exactly what I did, and that concluded my week right there, all right? So everything played out perfectly, and whenever you do not get a CISD entry, you should always make sure that you wait, right? So price can sometimes move higher, we can get a fair value gap, we can get an inversion, and price sometimes taps into it and moves higher, right? There's no clear signs to your entries except with the fact that you need to stick to one entry array, right? My favorite one is going to be the CISD. That is what I stick to. That is what actually works for me, right? So that is what I'm going to always stick to and always preach as well, because CISD is literally the last candle which will give you the confirmation that price is going to reverse, right? That is extremely important for me. And I primarily trade reversals, right? Around 95% of my trades are reversals. They are rarely continuations. So CISD is extremely important. Whenever you trade continuations as well, it is going to be quite something, right? So let's say you want to take a continuation trade here. Your entry would be right there, okay? Because that is a fair value gap, right? Price taps into a fair value gap and expands high to take out these highs. So that is something which you can definitely do as well, but that is something which I do not do, right? The risk to reward is not worth it for me, because I can just show you. You can take a long right there. Your stop should be somewhere here at swing lows. Trying to keep your stop here or somewhere like that, I'm sure you can see this on Twitter sometimes. That does not work in the long term, right? It's just a few concrete examples or a few cherry-picked examples that does work. And I'm sure if you do give it a lot of thought and a lot of effort, you will find that to be true. All right, so that concludes the entire stream, guys. All right, so I will go over the questions and I will actually end the stream there. So that is the end of the week for me, which is the first week of August. Definitely the best week I've had so far in the month of August. All right, since I'd say 2022. All right, so there are a few questions. Let me just go over them. All right, how do you run prop firms accounts? All right, that is pretty basic. It's really on MT5 or on the company's platform, right? Whichever they offer, that is what I go with. So there are basic videos you can definitely YouTube on and you will get your answer there. Your risk management in evals, right? So my risk management in evals are going to be a bit more aggressive in nature, but I definitely do not risk more than 1.5% on any of the trades, all right? Because I want to make sure I pass evals and I want to make sure I really protect my downside. So I cannot risk more than 1.5%. I do not gamble on evals, right? That's something which I do not do. I don't buy 10 accounts and make sure I pass 5 of them and then blow the rest. That's not something that I do. I like to trade everything with good risk management, right? But definitely my risk is going to be on the upper hand of 1.5% per trade, all right? Right, do you prefer going lower than 5 minute for entries like on the 3 minute? As you know, noise increases on lower time frames. No, that is something which I do not prefer, definitely not. Sometimes, which is extremely rare, I'd say 5% of the time I might tap into the 3 minute, or else I'm always going to stick to the 15 minute and the 5 minute for executions, right? These are basically all the time frames I use, so I just have them right here so you can actually look into it, all right? So that will be the end of the stream, guys. Thank you all for joining. And if you do want to see all these trades in real time, I would definitely recommend you to join the university. The link is in the description. And I do have a bunch of new members this last week. So I do hope sure that if you're interested, I will see you there. There are a couple of things you can actually look into in my website as well. All right. So, all right, there is another question. And all right, let me just get into it. Sorry, I'm a newbie. So how much have you invested till date and how much have you gained? Now, numbers are something which I do not go into, guys, because trust me, numbers can be faked. And I do see a lot of fake numbers out there. I just opened Twitter. I see someone who has made $95,000 on the 15-second chart in about 5 minutes since the market opened. So trying to give you all numbers is something which I'm going to avoid. All right. So that is it for the stream, guys. Do take care and stay safe. And I will speak to you all once again next week. All right. Bye-bye.